Jump off that exhausting hamster wheel and into balanced living with Dr. Marissa.
Promise you joy in the mystery.
Dr. Marissa, also known as the Asian Oprah. Her mission, to be a beneficial presence on the planet. Her purpose, to be your personal advocate to live, laugh, love, learn. Her life motto, don't die wondering. Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And welcome. You are tuned into Take My Advice. I'm not using it. Get balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on NBC News Radio, KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. iHeartRadio, iTunes, Audible, Amazon Music, Spreaker, Spotify, Stitcher, iHeartRadio, and more, because this is a show about hope and happiness, and I want the biggest possible platform to fulfill my Happy 88 mission, 88 million people that are more happy in the next 8 years. And so I have guests and topics to help you with that. And one of the beautiful things about life is our ability to be creative as we're reading books and see things that have happened in the world in a new way. And so I brought someone special into the studio today to help us with that. Terry Jastrow is a published author, successful screenwriter, produced playwright, and 7-time Emmy Award television producer-director, having been nominated 17 times. Terry is currently writing his next novel, and both his screenplay, Good Luck, Mr. Anthony, and stage play, Jane Fonda's War, are currently being considered for production in both New York City and LA. Terry and his wife, actress Ann Archer, live in Southern California. Please welcome to my studio, Terry Jastrow. Welcome to the show, Terry. I'm so glad you could spend a minute with me, a California minute, since we're both here. How have you been doing? How are you surviving through this thing called the pandemic?
Well, fairly well. Knock on something. My wife and I and family are well and healthy, although we've had all 3 Pfizer applications. So, we did it very early and we did it all. So far so good, but we send our best wishes and all the rest for people to get well who have the thing, for goodness sake.
Absolutely. So you had a full career already. You produced, tell me what your top that we may have seen, that you won the Emmy Awards that are nicely posted behind you. Tell me what your work was like then.
Well, I had the great good fortune of working at ABC Sports and ABC's Wide World of Sports for Roone Arledge, who was the president and executive producer. And in those days, which would be basically the 70s and 80s, ABC Sports had all the Olympic Games, summer and winter Olympic Games. And I had the great honor of being a producer and director at 6 Olympic Games, 3 Summer Olympics, which, if I can remember them, they would be Munich, and then Los Angeles, and then Montreal, and then 3 Winter Olympics as well.
Wow!
So, the Olympics are so great, and to be a part of that, capturing the stories of human beings, excelling and realizing their dreams, was really a dream come true for all of us television guys as well.
Absolutely. So you produced those. You were the
produced
producer.
and directed.
Wow.
When you think about being on the air for 2 weeks and being on the air for 8 or 10 hours a day, there's a number of producers and directors for sure, all under the great stewardship of Roone Arledge. And but he taught us, the mantra for ABC's Wide World of Sports, which is the thrill of victory
and the agony of defeat.
But the words that follow are the secret. The thrill of victory, the agony of defeat, the human drama of athletic competition. So it's not just about plays and scores, but it's about the human aspects, the human drama winning and losing in athletic competitions.
Yeah, I love that. I actually, when people ask me how my dating life is, I say, do you remember the ABC Sports? It's the thrill of the victory and the agony of defeat. That sums up my dating life. Yeah, so I know ABC's motto very well, but I'll have to add in the human drama. But although that also applies. That's why I don't date. But anyways, you're on the hot seat, not me.
Also, just for good measure, I was a director at a Super Bowl as well.
Which one?
Yeah, the one in Los Angeles. So it's, and we also did tons of college football games as well. So yeah.
Fabulous. Well, so you go from this super successful career, very high image marriage with a beautiful actress, Ann Archer. By the way, I was going to save it for later, but let's just start with that and then we'll dive into the book because I can't wait till later. How did you meet Ann?
I met her in an acting class. When I lived in New York, I lived and worked in New York for 7 years for ABC Sports. And I started studying acting with Lee Strasberg, and it was quite interesting. It's a fascinating art. I ended up, after 7 years, moving to Los Angeles for a variety of reasons. And dear friends of mine, actually David Ladd, so Alan Ladd's son, who was married to Cheryl Ladd at that time, were friends of mine. And they took me to an acting class, the Beverly Hills Playhouse. The acting teacher was Milton Katselas. Early on, I did a scene with Cheryl. And at the end of it, there was a critique. And all the actors in the theater took a break after the critique. And one actress who was sitting right next to Milton Katselas, the teacher, didn't leave. And I grabbed David and I said, "Oh my God, David, who is that?" And he looked over and he knew Ann. They were good friends. He said, "That's Ann Archer. You can forget about it. She would never be interested in you." And I said, "Oh, okay, all right. Can you introduce me to her?" And he said, "Sure." So we got off the stage, and he said, "Hi, Annie." "Oh, hi, David." And he said, "I want you to meet a friend of ours. He's just in here from New York. He's an actor as well." And he introduced us. And of course, like a lot of people, I was tongue-tied and completely smitten with her. But and a lot of guys were trying to date her and all that. And I said, I'm just gonna be her friend first. I'm going to be a friend of hers.
Smart strategy.
And a year and a half later, we got married.
Fast friends. Well, that's wonderful. Thank you for sharing that with me. Now, she's very well known for the one with the rabbit, Fatal Attraction.
Fatal Attraction, yeah. Yes, with Michael.
But many more.
Glenn Close. Yeah, it's quite an interesting movie. Nominations for the movie and for the actors and all that. It was a great experience. But she was really fun movies and television shows as well.
Yes. And we were talking before, if you stay with this show, and I know we're close to show number 600, but if you stay with the show, I think Terry agreed to maybe talk Ann into coming to talk about successful relationships, because they've been married for how many?
43 years.
43 years, which is in Hollywood, that's like it's very rare. Let's just put it that way. So that's great. But let's go to the topic at hand that I can't wait to find out about. It's a very tantalizing title, The Trial of George W. Bush. And this is a book that were you on commercial break or something and you said, "I want to write a book about George Bush," or how did that come about?
No, I mean, I'm not a television sports producer and director anymore. At my age, I'm pretty much a novelist and a screenwriter and a playwright. You know, I was a young guy during the Vietnam War, teenager during the Vietnam War. It was a terrible war. Should never have been fought. And there was a draft lottery, and a dear friend of mine was the second name pulled in the draft lottery, and in like no time, a few weeks later, he was killed in Vietnam. And it It was a very, very troubling war. And then I just to get it straight, I'm very much an advocate for peace. But I feel that you should have a strong military. I do, but to protect and defend the country and the people, not invade and try to capture another country. I'm an advocate of a strong military, but not to attack and invade and conquer. It's for the military, I think, should be there for protecting and defend the American people. But way too much of the time and money spent is invading other countries. In the case of the book, Iraq, and I hope we talk about it, because the whole idea of how the Iraq War got started is in itself a little insane, because it shouldn't have. In fact, how about we just start with that subject, okay?
Yes, please. But before you start that, I'm getting the nod that we have to go to commercial break. But when we come back, we're going to hear what the whole story is behind the story of the trial of George W. Bush, written by Terry Jastrow. When we come back here on Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned into Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on CNBC, NBC News, and NBC Sports Radio, KCAA, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere, including my YouTube channel, where if you free subscribe, you will get an alert every morning at 8 a.m. when a new show drops. And you'll also have access to my red carpet playlist with interviews with Halle Berry, John Travolta, Quincy Jones, and more. And access to my very first short film called PPP, Post-Pandemic Possibilities. So make sure you free subscribe. And today I have a wonderful treat for you. I have an author here who is also a 7-time Emmy Award winning producer and director. His name is Terry Jastrow, and he just put out a book called The Trial of George W. Bush. Please welcome back to the studio, Terry Jastrow. And welcome back.
Okay, hello.
Hello again. You were just about to jump into the whole premise and the story, which I don't want to stop you. So let's start at the time.
So actually, the beginning of this story is the 9/11 attacks in 2001. Obviously, it was a horrific thing for the United States, and was caused by Al-Qaeda and Osama bin Laden, which ultimately were in Afghanistan. And George W. Bush was president of the United States. Obviously, the most important thing on Americans' mind is bringing justice to the people who had done the worst terrorist attack on America in history. But by March of 2003, a year and a half later, he had been unable to bring Osama bin Laden to justice. And he panicked and turned his attention to Saddam Hussein in Iraq, claiming that Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction and may even have some culpability with the 9/11 attacks. And the first thing is that Saddam Hussein, if anything, was an enemy of Osama bin Laden. But how there was any connectivity between the attacks of 9/11 and the Iraq War, there is no connectivity. So he basically started the Iraq War on a false pretense. But he starts the war, and Americans and their coalition countries who joined America searched all over Iraq for months and were unable to find weapons of mass destruction. And so after a long time, he just began to terrorize Saddam Hussein, who was definitely a terrible guy, but he used the power of the U.S. military to take out Saddam Hussein and his sons. And the Iraq War, that happened a year or two, maybe 3 years into that war. But the Iraq War actually extended to 8.5 years. And by the way, there were no one ever found any weapons
of mass. Right.
So when we look at the cost of that war, we have to start with human lives. There were something around, I forget the exact numbers, but there was something around 5,000 American soldiers killed. But at that time, the body armor that soldiers had was such that there were fewer deaths and more injuries to the human body. And there were like tens of thousands that were injured, many of them still injured, and having to deal with war wounds even to this day. And on top of that, over the 8.5 years, it's estimated that the United States and its coalition team ended up killing as many as 1 million Iraqi people over time. And by the way, did not ever get Osama bin Laden. As we know, Barack Obama, as president, finally came in and took out Osama bin Laden. So there is an institution called the International Criminal Court that was started by peace-loving people of peace-loving countries after World War II. It was established under the auspices of the United Nations, which of course is in New York. And the International Criminal Court was built in The Hague, which is known as a neutral country,
right,
which is one of the reasons they built it. And the International Criminal Court exists for times when a crime and a criminal is so large that the country itself cannot bring the suspected criminal to justice. In that case, there is not just a national set of crimes, but an international set of crimes, which is adjudicated on in the International Criminal Court. And so a lot of the Nazi criminals were taken out. Some of the tyrants in Africa have been tried and found guilty and been put to death. And so in this story, which obviously takes place in the future, it's important to know that crimes like war crimes and crimes against humanity have no statute of limitations. Meaning that a suspected criminal is subject to arrest and trial until the day he dies. Now, George W. Bush, I think he's about 75 years old. So he is subject actually to be put on trial for war crimes and crimes against humanity that are very specifically defined and clearly done during the Iraq War. He is liable to be arrested and brought to the International Criminal Court and put on trial for crimes that is suspected at the International Criminal Court. So I just imagined what it would be. I studied a lot about international criminal law. I went to the International Criminal Court and spent 2 or 3 weeks a couple of times to interview attorneys, defense attorneys, prosecution attorneys, study the law enough to be able to create a trial. So the novel imagines that George W. Bush is abducted off a golf course in St. Andrews, Scotland, where he loves golf. He might be playing there, and transported against his will to the International Criminal Court and stands trial for crimes that he's accused of in connection with the Iraq War. It's also important to say that in international criminal law, the single person most responsible is brought to trial first. So people always say, well, what about Dick Cheney, the vice president? And what about Donald Rumsfeld, the Secretary of State? Absolutely, they are complicit in those crimes, potentially committed in those crimes. But under international law, the single person most responsible, and as President of the United States, he is most responsible for waging the Iraq War. It never would have happened without him. And he is most responsible for convincing Congress, the U.S. government, to wage the war. So as the story goes on in the novel, there is a prosecuting attorney. He ends up getting defense attorneys. And then there are witnesses like Condoleezza Rice, and other people who were involved and knew about it, brought to trial. So there's defense witnesses and prosecution witnesses. And even though Bush refused to testify in the beginning, in the story, he ends up deciding he has to testify. And the last part of the book is him being actually put on trial for what he did and the commission of his crimes during the Iraq War.
Wow. That's quite the story. And I now am going to cross-examine you when we come back here on Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show on KCAA, the station that leaves no listener behind. Don't go away. We'll be right back with author Terry Jastrow.
Take back your life with Dr. Marissa Pay.
And we're back. You're tuned into Take My Advice. I'm Not Using It. Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa, the morning show here on KCAA NBC News Radio, AM 1050, FM 102.3, FM 106.5, and streaming everywhere. Yes, this is the #1 news talk station in the Inland Empire, and you are listening to the #1 show at 8 a.m. this morning show. Thanks for staying with me. Thanks for supporting my piecework. Y'all know if you're shopping this holiday season on Amazon, go to my Smile Amazon nonprofit 8 Ways to Happiness, and you'll be supporting my work with teens, young adults, and children who have temporarily lost their birthright to happiness. To regain that, you can help me just shopping on Amazon, 8 Ways to Happiness. And we're going to come back now with my very special guest, Terry Jastrow, who has just laid out the story that I'm going to be reading as soon as the book gets here, because it is fascinating to me. I have not really, I am also not a fan of war, and when we go through Veterans Day, and when we go through, I honor the veterans, absolutely. I cover those stories because whether I support war or not, those people have laid down their lives to support our ability to have democracy in this country. And for that, I want to honor them. But I agree with you. I don't think that wars that we insert ourselves in a way that we think is going to better them, and it's not, it ends up hurting them probably more than helping, is a good idea. So in this layout that you have in this book, you went to the International Court, that exists. George Bush was president, that exists. He, as you laid out, he was trying to go after Osama bin Laden after 9/11, and then all of a sudden the direction went to Iraq and Saddam Hussein. So where did you go, and what percentage was based on what you looked up as? I mean, we can play armchair quarterback now and say, well, he was trying to, deflect attention from his failure of finding and killing Osama bin Laden, or we can say, well, he actually had credible information. So where did you find the data to convict him in this trial? Or maybe not convict him, but bring it forth.
Yes, indeed. Well, first of all, there are a number of books that have been written about the Iraq War. And many of the principal players have written a book. George W. Bush, for sure, Condoleezza Rice, Dick Cheney, Richard Clarke. A lot of people have written books and explain what they did and when they did. And one of my favorite things about writing is research, because I don't particularly, especially on the subjects that's this important, I think the truth resonates with people. And so I wanted to make it as authentic as I can. And then along the way, I had both military and judicial experts reading what I was writing and counseling me and interviewing them. And then I had a number of authorities on war and peace read it to make sure that it was entirely feasible and accurate and fair, because I wasn't going out to basically write a book that finds George W. Bush guilty. What I do is set the story out so that the reader themselves can decide for themselves whether he's guilty of war crimes or crimes against humanity. I will tell you that there's interesting precedent here in the United States, because Dwight D. Eisenhower, this last speech from the White House before he ended his presidency, he warned of something called the military-industrial complex. The military-industrial complex. And it's that unholy alliance between the military and big business. Because when wars occur, much of the treasury of a country is spent on fighting the war. Why? Because politicians can make people so fearful that they're worried about their own lives, and they take money that maybe should be spent on infrastructure and climate change and all these things that can help humanity, and take that money and apply it to war. So Eisenhower called it the military-industrial complex. It's the relationship between the military and big business. Because when government begins to spend lots of money through the military, they go to these huge corporations and give those corporations tons of money. I mean, billions. I think the Iraq War, and it's there to be thinking, but I think it cost $4 trillion. Now, a trillion has 12 zeros. Not 1 trillion, but $4 trillion. Not to mention that it killed thousands of Americans and hundreds of thousands of Iraqis and other people without finding weapons of mass destruction.
Right.
It was a pretext to fight this war that was based on illogical reasons.
Yeah.
And so one of the reasons I wrote this book is to tell the story so that the common citizens can understand about this relationship between the military and big business. I mean, huge Raytheon and Halliburton and big businesses, they make tons of money, and the stock goes up, and the stock owners are happy. Right. All at the cost of human lives.
Yeah.
So the basic sense of it and hope here is that the people become knowledgeable about this and help stop such wars in the future.
Yeah. Brilliant. You've made a want to read it person out of me, because it sounds like it's based, how movies are, say, based on true events, based on a true story. So this really is, it's not fiction. It's an actual,
it's based on
it's an extrapolation based on facts that that are from experts, not just from your imagination.
Right. So as it happens in the future, as the story takes place in the future, by definition, it's not fact. It's not nonfiction. It's obviously fiction, but it's laid out as if it could happen today.
Right.
Yeah.
Brilliant. That's brilliant. I commend you for that, because it's not just a story to make you, whatever, fiction stories make you feel good or interest you or hold your attention. But this one actually has an educational component that is so necessary. And I just had a flash, not just about corporation and lobbyists and politicians, but also the compassion that we don't seem to have for veterans from Vietnam War or the Iraqi War. We're all about the World War I, World War II, and then it comes, all this homelessness, all of the money, the $1 trillion could have really set all of our veterans in a space where they could come home and be honored instead of homeless and on drugs. I mean, but that's the educational component is why I'm going to, absolutely do an Asian Oprah giveaway. You're so kind as to offer that for my listeners. But I'm encouraging you to get this book, because we have to care.
To say, if I might,
please,
is that it's so easy to get. It's the trial of George W. Bush, right? I don't know if I can get this in there. Right? There's the book, the trial of George W. Bush. You can go to Amazon Books, and it's very easy to get. I mean, it's like $13 or $14 or something like that. We didn't want it to be too expensive because we wanted a lot of people to buy it. Also, and importantly, I say this because I love to read and have for years, but I don't read so much as I listen to novels with audiobooks. They're often very, very good. I consume all my novels and books in audiobooks. And so The Trial of George W. Bush is also an audiobook. So your viewers have an opportunity to go to Amazon and buy the book, or go to Amazon Audiobooks and buy the audiobook. Same title, The Trial of George W. Bush, either in a book form or in an audiobook, and you can listen to it.
Beautiful. If you've just tuned in, you're wondering what good-looking guy is sitting in my virtual studio today. His name is Terry Jastrow, and relax, he's not single. He's married to the beautiful actress Ann Archer, and but we're just friends, and I'm enjoying this time getting to know him and his wonderful book. Now, here's a $1 million question. You actually have a relationship with George W. Bush, so how is this going to go down?
I'm glad you asked. My daddy was an oil man in Midland, Texas. And George W. Bush's father, George H.W. Bush, was an oil man, also living in Midland, Texas at that time. This is like the mid-50s. I played Little League Baseball against George.
Oh,
he was on the Cubs. I was on the Braves. We played with each other. He was a catcher. And I'm too modest to say who won, but George's team lost. And a few years later, I was at the University of Houston, and I was dating a girl, and he was dating this girl's sister. They may even been twins, I forget. But I would see him occasionally socially. And so I know him. He's a very charming guy. He's the life of any party. It's always incongruous to me that someone who is, so lovable and fun would have been, the single person most responsible for waging this horrible war. But it's not a popularity contest. It's a question of, law and order. And, when he was president, he had a lot of people around him who started beating the drum for war with Iraq, starting with Cheney and Clark and a lot of those other guys.
Do you think they did that because of money, or do you think they did that because they really thought that Iraq was a player in the threat to America?
Well,
without giving the book away,
there had to be some pretext that was not fact. It wasn't the truth, but they based it on things that they made so credible that people began to believe that there was a threat on America and America's friends. So I don't, it's not my place to accuse people of specific things. All I wanted to do as a storyteller is lay out the story, lay out the facts, and let people decide for themselves. But ultimately, I will tell you, I love peace and harmony and advocate for that, for human beings. Because, those of us who love peace have got to be strong and vocal as much or more than those who advocate for war.
Absolutely. So have you gotten any negative reaction from, let's say, strong right or left, strong Bush administration supporters? Nobody said, what are you doing? We don't need to further divide people at this time. We need to bring together. Any of that?
No.
Okay.
No.
And why are you attacking, the Republicans? Any of that?
Yeah. No.
Not yet.
No, because again, if anybody reads the book, I don't take a position. I advocate for the prosecution, who are trying to find George W. Bush guilty, and the defense, who are defending George W. Bush. And, Condoleezza Rice and other people who were, in his cabinet and supported him. They are interviewed as well. And
so did you actually interviewed Condoleezza Rice?
Yeah.
Oh.
Yeah. And how did I do that? It's because I read all of her speeches and her book, and I found things that she actually said about it. And I framed them in a question and answer with her doing her testimony at the International Criminal Court. So it was obviously I did it, a number of years after. I wrote it after the Iraq War and was over. But there's tons of evidence. But I will tell you this: when you think about the story and you think about the trial, you think that it's going to be guilty or innocent. But in this novel, neither one of those two things happen.
Interesting. Okay, so it really is fair. It is really up to the reader to decide. That's what you're saying. It's one of those, you pick your ending.
Well, listen, George W. Bush is 75 years old. He did what he did.
Right.
Condoleezza Rice, those people, they did what they did. It's there for all people to see, for history to know.
Right.
I'm interested in people today, younger people today, who have a chance to get it right, to avoid war at all cost, and to seek peace. That's what I'm interested in. I'm not here to hurt anybody or damage anybody. I'm here to advocate for young people in the future, for peace over war. That was my impetus in the beginning, and I will go to my grave with that in my mind.
I'm so glad you're on my show, because I don't know if you know, that's my whole thing is peace in, peace out, world peace through inner peace. That's my thing. It's been I have pictures with all the celebrities always doing peace, because that's
my sister and I am your brother.
Oh, thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Now, one of the interesting premises you lay out in the book is that leaders should be held accountable for horrific events.
Yeah, and potential crimes that they may have committed.
So what does that say about Trump and Capitol Hill?
Let me tell you that is a legitimate question and a huge issue. But Trump came after my story.
That's a good answer.
So I have my own feelings about Donald Trump. Okay.
Yeah.
Let me just tell you, I didn't vote for him.
Okay.
But I'd rather not go down that rabbit hole.
Absolutely. I just thought that was an interesting question about having that as a responsibility for leaders, because there is no accountability, it seems like, because I still can't wrap my head around. I remember when we declared war on Iraq, I said to myself, wait a minute, is there a connection? So weren't there people around him that said, this is going to be a hard sell, or this is going to be a little perplexing for people?
Well, you really do need to read the book, because that's a very important question. And if you're having it, there could be thousands of others who have that, okay? But it's the military-industrial complex that foments up the war, and they have to go to politicians. They have to go to the government to get it. So there's money behind this, dirty money behind this, because politicians, especially unscrupulous politicians, they seek money so they can continue to be in office and do what they do their agenda.
Absolutely.
But it's a very important question. But my book doesn't take that on. But it needs to be addressed for sure, because if we're interested in not having more wars in the future, this issue has got to be dealt with. And the other thing we talked about earlier is when a country such as the United States taxes its people and uses that treasury to go fight wars, it takes it away from, just think about it, education, climate control, infrastructure, all the weather that we have these days, the tornadoes, the destruction of Tennessee and all these other places. These are the worst. There's Dan right there.
The girlfriend.
Darling, I'm still doing this interview, and I'll call you as soon as I'm done, okay? Okay, lover. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Man Archer. But you got my point. I just, my hope is that, because the only thing that's going to stop this, Dr. Marissa, the only thing is the will of the people, the voice of the people. This will happen again. It happened at the Vietnam War. It happened in the Iraq War. This will happen again. The only thing that can stop it is an aware and active citizenry. They can put an end to it before it starts. So people need to read the book, not only because it's an interesting read and informative, but it has to do with the very idea of survival in the future.
Let's not do this again. I actually interviewed Rennie Davis. He was one of the Chicago 7, the trial of Chicago 7. I got to interview him 2 months before he passed. So he's right there with you. I would have loved to had both of you talk together. I think that would have been phenomenal. Maybe I'll get his wife to talk with you.
Yeah, we would have had a good conversation.
Yeah. But thank you for the work you're doing. Thank you for the book. I think it's when I saw the publicity sheet and it was a fiction, I'm like, oh, okay. But now I'm like completely turned around. I definitely will read it. And I think you should come back on and we should talk about it. I think that it should be like a guide. You should do like a discussion guide, like a book club. We'll have a book club.
Yeah, it's hard to do.
There we go. So, the trial of George W. Bush.
Right. If you that by the way, that's the International Criminal Court building. That's the exterior of the International Criminal Court in The Hague.
Oh.
So I'll make a deal with you. When you finish reading the book, we'll talk again.
All right. That sounds great. And your Asian Oprah giveaway today, I think you offered me 5, right?
You know what? You take it up with our...
Okay, but at least the first person to go to my website, drmarissa.life, and put in the subject line, George W. Bush, will get a free signed copy, yes, from Terry Jastrow. All right. And that'll be the Asian Oprah giveaway. You get a Terry Jastrow book. You get a book. But thank you so much. Oh, there is one quick last question I ask all my guests. To who and what are you most grateful for?
My parents and my wife.
Beautiful. Beautiful. Well, thank you so much. I'm sorry? And your 2 boys.
We have 2 sons. So.
Yeah, you better get that in.
A lot of others I'm grateful for.
Well, that's wonderful. Can you do this with me?
Yes, indeed. Peace.
Peace in, peace out.
Peace out.
World peace.
World peace.
Through inner peace.
I'm with you.
Tell your wife I said hello.
I'll give her a kiss.
Okay, do that.
Okay, this was fun.
Thank you so much. My new brother, Terry Jastrow, thanks for joining me here on Take My Advice, I'm Not Using It, Get Balanced with Dr. Marissa. This is show number 599. Thank you so much for continuing to support Hope and Happiness. This is Dr. Marissa reporting live from my living room during the pandemic, reminding you to go forth and multiply the goodness that you are. Tomorrow's a big day. Come back for show 600. Have the best day ever. See you tomorrow.